Hello again. Last week I mentioned the fact that Advent is approaching and how strange it felt to me that Advent is approaching, given that normal service was suspended back in the middle of Lent. I found it difficult this year to keep track of where we are in the year, and I can only assume that this is because a lot of my normal reference points for the rhythm of the year have been disrupted. Or maybe because I'm more tired. Or maybe because I'm not as mentally agile as I like to think I once was. Whatever. This coming Sunday is Advent Sunday, the beginning of Advent. I like Advent Sunday. Part of that is about the run-up to Christmas, I think, but it's also a memory of Advent Sunday being the first time I ever preached a sermon. I was in a fellowship group of fellow undergraduate students, and we were due to take a service at one of the churches in the circuit. As I remember it, on the evening we began our plans, no one else seemed to be volunteering to do the sermon, so I stuck my hand up and my neck out. That experience, alongside recovering from illness shortly afterwards, ended up influencing the fact that I began to train to be a local preacher, and so eventually I suppose it influenced me ending up where I am now. And each year, the beginning of Advent and the beginning of December take me back to those times just a little bit. Well, the beginning of Advent and the beginning of December are not quite the same thing, of course. Advent, in the church's calendar we use, begins on the fourth Sunday before Christmas, so the date of the beginning of Advent varies. In a couple of years' time it'll be at its earliest, the year after that it'll be at its latest. At its earliest it happens on the 27th of November, and at its latest it happens on the 3rd of December. This year it's the 29th of November. But Advent calendars generally start on the 1st of December. A more traditional Advent calendar might entice you to open a door each day to find a scene from the Nativity story behind it, perhaps with Bible verses. But more and more the expectation seems to have become that what you find behind the door is chocolate. But you can get all sorts of things now: beauty products, coffee, tea, gin, cheese, whatever you want, probably. I've just looked on Amazon, and the one they seem to be pushing at the moment is a Doritos Advent calendar. A packet of crisps every day for Advent. But let's not get too hung up on what might be anything like an original meaning for Advent calendars, because they don't go too far back. As with much of our traditional Christmas, they may well have been 19th century German in origin. But however far these things move from what might have been any original meaning, it seems that opening the doors is very often still what really makes it an Advent calendar. This year we've been legally required to close the doors of our church buildings for some time, and they will still be closed on Advent Sunday, and we'll be worshipping either with the pre-recorded circuit service or with a service on Zoom for the churches where I work. But by the following week, those restrictions will have been lifted. But whether we can open the doors of the building or not, and whether or not we have an actual Advent calendar with doors to open, I think that idea of opening doors as we get closer to Christmas is worth holding for a while. I can feel myself getting dangerously close to sermon territory here. Sermons can be great. I love sermons. I look forward to sermons. But this isn't one. So I'm going to swing away from the temptation to say something like, open the doors of your heart to Jesus. I think we can take that as read. And as with the song, Open the Eyes of My Heart, which you can find in the Circuit Songbook, I find I get tied up too easily with wondering whether a heart can have eyes or doors. And the thing which we prepare ourselves to ponder and celebrate at Christmas time is so much more than just a personal, individual willingness to open up to God. It is that, but it's more than that. The old idea of a time of fasting to consider the so-called four end things, death, judgment, heaven and hell, has been tempered by this idea of giving yourself an extra little treat each day in the run-up to Christmas. Oh, look, another little miniature bottle of gin. or something that I suppose is meant to make me look more beautiful, or crisps. I'm going to sidestep another temptation, which is to say that the old meaning has to be the best in itself. I don't think that idea really makes much more sense in the church than it does in language, because words change their meaning and so do traditions. Because we like to beat ourselves up, or perhaps sometimes more accurately beat other people up, for starting Christmas too soon or having treats when we should be fasting. And I wonder whether that comes in part actually from our squeamishness about those four end things. Heaven and hell are not just those simplistic ideas of the good and bad places to go after you die. I think that's a particular interpretation of what the biblical texts might suggest about ancient thinking on those topics. They're about the here and now too. And death is something we very often would really rather not think about, thank you very much. In a society where the beauty products try to keep us looking younger, we spend a fair bit of energy and a not insignificant amount of money trying to avoid any hint of death. And then we Christians have lumped on top of all that this huge guilt and shame-inducing idea of judgment. But judgment is about justice, God's fairness. And perhaps if there is squeamishness about judgment, it might make us wonder whether there is something unfair in our way of living as a society. And so Advent stands as a warning, a signpost, an alarm to tell us to watch out, because a reckoning is coming. Christmas is about God's very self becoming small and dwelling among us. It's God giving worth to the so-called lowest of the low. And for the lowest of the low, judgment and justice is bloody good news. Happy Advent. Enjoy your crisps. God bless. See you soon.